Hey team, welcome to this presentation on the reward cycle for making habits that stick. Now, if you've ever tried to make a new habit, but just failed to make them stick, failed to get any traction, or if you've managed to start, but you've lacked on the follow through and you haven't quite managed to keep it up, this presentation is for you. All right. There are some crucial steps to make sure that you have got all of the bases covered. And today we're going to take a look at just one of those. So first of all, let me remind you or introduce you to the habit loop, depending on whether you are familiar with this or not. All right. So every habit that we make, that our brains get hardwired into our brains, have some very specific components. They have a cue or a trigger. They then have a routine or the actual habit or the action that you're taking. They have a reward, so they have an outcome or something that makes you feel good or something that you get out of it. And that reward makes you want to do the routine and this loop again. So it cements in this pathway into your brain. Essentially what that reward is doing is telling your brain that that habit and that action was successful. It did something good, all right? So that's why today we are focusing on the reward part of this habit loop, all right? So why are we focusing on this? Because we so often forget about it. We're so caught up in planning and our cues and our triggers and our routines, exactly what we're going to do and how we're going to do it. And that is all super important. But we often forget to build in a reward into that process. And this really does cement this process into our brain, hardwires it into our neurons, and makes us want to repeat it again and again and again. So it is crucial. If we miss this step, the habit or the action, doesn't become a habit. It's a one-off action. We don't really see the need to repeat it. So we just do it once and we forget about it. So this reward is a really, really crucial part of the process. Let's think about this, okay? As an example, you've had a crap day at work. You feel like shit. You might be tired. You might be sad. You might be stressed out. Whatever it is, you feel bad. What do? We're going to pick up a cupcake on the way home. All right? We're going to treat ourselves because we feel bad. That is our habit. That cupcake makes us feel good, gives us a sugar rush. It makes us happy. That happiness means that it's cementing this in. It's confirming that that's a good thing for us. So evolutionary-wise, this was very important because, for example, in survival scenarios where we might be sick or unwell or, having some kind of threat to our survival as our trigger, then if we did an action or undertook a habit that gave us something good, then that showed our brains that that habit was worthwhile. It kept us alive and it made us feel good. It didn't kill us. It didn't make us feel worse. So it's not something we don't ever want to do again. It's something that had a positive outcome. So it makes us want to redo that habit again and again and again. And it really cements that into our brain. So those are the three portions, right? We have the cue, the feeling, we have the routine of the cupcake, and then we have the reward of feeling much better. What this actually is doing on a biological level and physiological level, that habit in this example is the cupcake. That cupcake contains sugar. What that sugar does to us is it promotes dopamine release in the brain, and dopamine is our feel-good chemical. Makes us happy. So in this particular instance, the reason that sugar makes us feel good when we're currently feeling rubbish is because it gives us a hit of dopamine. That's why it's such an easy trap to get caught into, because on a physiological level, it does make us feel better. Now, this is the same pathway and the same scenario that happens with addictive behaviors. drugs promote dopamine, gambling, sex, any sort of addiction will promote this hit of dopamine in our brains, which make us feel good and cements this pathway in and makes us want to do that behavior again and again and again and again. We get addicted to it. And in this scenario, that's exactly what happens. We get addicted to sugar. We get addicted to treats because it makes us feel good by giving us that dopamine hit. All right, so we can use this to our advantage. But first of all, I want to give you another scenario. Same scenario, we feel crap, we've had a rubbish day, feeling sad, angry, upset, whatever it might be. This time, we're doing our best to be healthy. And instead of having a cupcake on the way home, we're going to pick up some vegetables and make ourselves a healthy dinner. Now, how does that make us feel? Unfortunately, because those vegetables don't contain sugar or don't contain something that gives us an immediate hit of dopamine, the immediate reward, is slightly lacking. So we don't get that immediate hit. We don't get that feel-good rush. So this pathway isn't quite complete. What does happen, though, is the payoff for eating those vegetables is delayed. We know it will make us feel better in the long run. It will make us less stressed, less moody, less anxious, better able to cope with stresses and strains of the day. But those are all very far away. They're very intangible. They don't provide an immediate dopamine hit in response to that habit that we've just undertaken of eating those vegetables. So we've got a bit of a dilemma. We have the habit that we need to do to help this cycle in the long term, but it doesn't help our brains cement this as a habit in the short term. It makes that cue and that pathway very, very weak, so it doesn't make us want to repeat this over and over again. So what we need to do is we need to create a reward. We need to create a gift. We need to create something that will give us that immediate hit of dopamine that we want. So we want to kind of stack this together with something else that will give us that hit of dopamine that will help strengthen this reward pathway. So essentially, we're kind of putting these vegetables and hijacking them into another habit pathway that will give us that dopamine hit and will strengthen this habit loop. Now, what is that reward going to be? Well, it could be all sorts of things, all right? Essentially, what we want to do is we want to amplify that reward and make it bigger. So I'll come to some options soon as to what that reward can actually be, but the purpose of this is to amplify this process, amplify the reward aspect of this habit loop in this scenario and make it bigger. We want to emphasize it. We also want to bring it closer and make it much more immediate, because it's immediate rewards which are going to cement that into our brain. If the reward and the payoff is even an hour, 2 hours later, your brain doesn't necessarily associate that action with that reward. It can get very confused. So it needs to be an almost immediate reward in some way. And this is where it can get a little bit tricky. But here are some scenarios that you can play with. First of all, I think it's really important that you grab out a piece of paper and a pen and you make a whole list of things that make you feel good, that give you that dopamine hit, because what feels good for one person won't feel good for the next, and what is a reward for one person won't be a reward for the next. So for some of you, a reward might be, shopping for a new outfit. Whereas for some people, they might hate shopping, and that's a punishment more than it is a reward. So there's no one thing that's going to work for everybody. It depends on what makes you feel good. For somebody else, it might be watching a comedian or watching a movie, all right? And so here are some examples of what that reward could be. It could be shopping. It could be giving yourself a gift. It could be some element of self-care. And this is where kind of bigging up the effect and being super mindful of the habit that we're doing and all of the great things that that habit is doing to our body on a cellular level, even though we can't, that's not tangible for us yet. If we can amplify that and really feel those nutrients in the vegetables and that good stuff happening and all those antioxidants whizzing around, if we can visualize that and emphasize it, that can help build this reward pathway in, because it makes us feel good. It feels like what we're doing is actually doing some good. It might be some kind of fun or enjoyment. Like I mentioned, it might be watching a comedian. It might be hanging out with your favorite person. It might be playing a game that you enjoy. It might be buying yourself a new book or opening a new book or reading a new book. It might be buying yourself flowers. Or, and this is a really useful one that I use a lot in my programs, maintaining a streak. So as human beings, we're more tied to not losing what we have than gaining new things. So if you're given two options, losing something is a much bigger hit to compared to not getting something new, because you already have something and losing it is very tangible, whereas it's a bit harder to kind of quantify and to feel what it's like to have something that you don't have yet. So losing something is usually a bigger motivator than gaining something. So in that way, maintaining a streak is really useful. And what I mean by this is, if you've got a habit tracker and you're ticking off every day, if you've done something, so every day that you've eaten vegetables, you're putting a tick in that checkbox and you're maintaining the streak, and you can see that streak building up. You can see those ticks after ticks after ticks building up into a nice even streak. If you can visually see that, that's more motivating. You don't want to miss a day because you'll lose your streak. That's quite motivating, and that's been proven by behavioral psychology studies and tests that maintaining that streak is really useful. So that's why accountability and checking in daily is really useful, because it helps us to maintain this streak. And it's very sneaky because a lot of games use this. So you think about Candy Crush and things like this. They'll give you extra rewards for maintaining a streak, or they'll tell you how many days in a row you've played to try, without a break, to try and encourage you to keep playing and keep building that streak, because the more you do, the more you've got to lose when you break it. So it encourages you to not break that streak. So as simple as just tracking your progress can be really motivating, and ticking that box on your habit tracker can be enough of a reward and enough of a dopamine hit to see that streak building. The most important thing is that it is just something that makes you feel good, all right? So make your own list, brainstorm all of the things that make you feel good, and start trying to use some of those as rewards each time you do a habit. Another way to do this is to identify the things in your life that you already enjoy. Maybe those guilty pleasures, which you almost feel a little bit of guilt about, or your vices. And use those as rewards. So you only get to do those things when you've completed your habit. That way, you're sort of bringing that reward closer, and you're kind of joining that reward and that feel-good activity with another activity that you know that you should do. All right, so it's kind of joining these two things together, something you need to do and something you want to do. If you can cement those together, then you're completing this habit loop and this habit pathway. Make a list of everything that makes you feel good and see if you can start using some of those as rewards after your habit. Do not forget the reward, all right? This is the most important part of this pathway. It's going to cement that into your brain, hardwire it into your neural pathways. And that's the only way that a single action becomes a regularly repeated habit. So celebrate those wins, guys. No matter what it is, celebrate it. Whether it's a repeated thing, whether it's when you get a streak of 20 days, find a goal to hit and celebrate that win, and then build back up to that win again. Every time you do something that's worthy, celebrate it. Really get in there and celebrate it and make yourself feel good and get that dopamine buzzing around your brain. And that is going to make these habits stick, and it's going to make them so much easier for you to build them into your way of life and transform the way that you eat, move, and live on a daily basis. Let me know your comments to this video. If you've got any great ideas, any tips, or anything that's worked for you specifically, let me know. I love to hear about them, and tell me how you celebrate those wins. Make a plan now to celebrate the wins and look forward to it, because anticipation is another really big component in this. All right, enjoy, guys. Go out and celebrate those wins.